Hey, welcome back. It's fantastic Friday, as far as I'm concerned, and a delightful weekend it will be. On Sunday, we will be in Atlantic City, New Jersey, celebrating the bachelor party of the man on my left, Mr. Frank Morano. And the man behind the curtain on the Skype today, no, it's not the little man Kamala Harris was referring to. It's one of the biggest guys around. Professor Stephen Cohen joins us today. He's a professor emeritus of Russian Studies and Politics at NYU and Princeton. He's the Nation contributing editor. And his most recent book is War with Russia, From Putin and Ukraine to Trump and Russiagate. Doc, thanks for joining us again. Really appreciate having you on. And I know you're testing out all your new equipment today.
I'm getting to be high-tech at my age.
So, Doc, there's a lot going on. It doesn't seem like with the Democratic debates they want to talk about impeachment or Russiagate or any of that stuff. They're trying to get it in the rearview mirror. But I was reading this morning how people think that they're fixing to bring some charges against McCabe. What do you think?
Well, I was surprised, but on the other hand, maybe not surprised that Russia never came up last night. And yet, for 3 years, we've lived with this phenomenon, false allegations, called Russiagate, which has put American-Russian relations in the tank. In fact, excuse me, guys, the title of my book, my recent book, I thought about it a long time. I'm not a tabloid guy, but I put the title War with Russia ? Because I have the feeling that we're closer to war with Russia than perhaps we've ever been. I'm really worried whether we're looking at Ukraine or Syria, and particularly now we have a president who's not enabled to get us out of any kind of crisis the way, say, John Kennedy was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I would then bring this up to date by saying that I forced myself to watch those debates last night, and so far as I noticed, the word Russia was never mentioned. The subject of our relationship, still our most existential relationship. And here I'm going to betray my age and maybe, like Joe Biden, my lousy memory, and say I can't recall a precedent for this in the history of American elections where we had a debate and where the subject of the relationship with what was then the Soviet Union, the other nuclear power, and all the crises that we find ourselves in with that superpower did not come up one time.
Well, and to me, that's the shame of excluding Tulsi Gabbard from this debate, given her emphasis on foreign policy and her experience in foreign policy. But I do want to ask you, Professor Cohen, about what's happening in Russia now. There were reports a few days ago that Vladimir Putin's party, United Russia, didn't fare too well in the municipal elections, and folks are wondering if this is a harbinger of future elections to come. I'm confused. I thought Vladimir Putin was a Stalin-esque vicious dictator that just controlled all the elections and nothing was fair.
Yeah, you would think from reading the American media that he killed every oppositionist, and therefore there would have been no candidates left to protest. Let me tell you how I see it very, very briefly. I'm a historian, I think historically. I look at these events in Moscow, not only in the streets of Moscow, but at regional and local elections. These are periodic elections for the governors of very large territories, sort of comparable to our states, and the mayors of very big cities. I see this as another stage in the long history of the democratization of Russia. Now, I don't want to go too scholarly on you, but stop and think about it. I don't know how old you are, Frank, but do you remember the 1980s and Gorbachev?
Vividly.
No one knows how old he is, Doc. He doesn't disclose that.
All right, well, that's fair enough. But let's remind our audience that the modern-day democratization, or the struggle for the democracy of Russia, began in the late 1980s under Gorbachev. So help me with my math. That's about almost exactly 30 years ago, right?
Yep.
All right. Now be a little scholarly and historical and ask about the democratization of other countries. Say England, which is said to be the mother home of democracy, and the United States. It took decades to achieve what we would consider an approximation of democracy. Women didn't have the vote. People who did not own property didn't have the vote originally in England. I grew up in the Jim Crow South, in Kentucky. I can tell you, blacks did not have the vote. It took decades decades as our democracy unfolded through struggle. So something analogous, not exactly analogous, but something similar in the sense that the democratization of a country is a long historical process. Add to that Russia does not have a substantial history of democratic traditions and practices. It has a tradition, but it's weak. So we shouldn't be surprised when we see these elections. It's a good thing there's elections. It's a good thing there's protesters. It's not unexpected that the government doesn't play fair in all regions. That some candidates aren't permitted on some candidates aren't permitted on the ballot. We've seen this in many countries. So let's keep Russia in historical perspective, which rarely happens in the United States.
Well, Doctor, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Your insights on Russia and all things geopolitical are always right on the money. We're going to have Dr. Stephen Cohen on a little, plenty more, because he's got all new equipment and he looked great with that shot today. I want to thank you for joining us for a Friday Liquid Lunch, and we'll see you soon. Okay, Doc?
All right, guys. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We're going to take a quick break. It's Friday, and it's literally the last call, closing time for another week of Liquid Lunch. We're going to take a quick break, come back. Frankie's going to WTF me, and we're going to wrap it up for this week.